For 8 years, the United States has been executing a very clear stratagem, and that is to reduce its reliance on Chinese imports.
Right.
And if you just look at the top-line data, I mean, it seems like an overwhelming success.
Yeah, on paper.
Yeah, exactly. On paper, the share of U.S. imports coming directly from China dropped from 21% down to just 9%. So de-risking worked, right?
I would think so.
But today we're unpacking this massive $200 billion paradox. If the U.S. successfully blocked all these Chinese imports, how do we explain the fact that Chinese companies have spent over $200 billion building brand new factories all over the globe just in the past 3 years?
Yeah, it's a staggering number. And the numbers seem to completely contradict each other, which is why we really need to dig into the mechanism behind this shift for this deep dive.
Right.
Because based on some recent reporting from The Economist, we are not looking at the decline of Chinese manufacturing.
Oh.
What we are actually watching is a total rewiring of global trade. So the era of made in China is fading, sure.
Mm-hmm.
But it's being replaced by a much more complex era of made by China.
Made by China. Wow. I mean, a $200 billion rewiring it's hard to even conceptualize. If they aren't pouring that capital into domestic facilities back home, we need to figure out where that money is physically landing.
Right. And to track that capital, we have to look outside the traditional supply chain maps that we're used to.
Okay, like where?
Well, take the Suez Canal Economic Zone in Egypt.
Oh, sure.
Specifically around the port of Ain Sokhna. I mean, this is an ancient global trade node, right?
Yeah, highly strategic.
Exactly. But today, it is suddenly teeming with Chinese factories. They're manufacturing fiberglass, electrical equipment, you name it.
Wow.
In fact, about half of the recent investment in this entire economic zone comes directly from China.
Half. Just from China.
Half.
I mean, it makes sense to set up shop near the Suez Canal, for shipping access to Europe. But this isn't just an Egyptian phenomenon, right?
No, not at all.
Because looking at the data, this map is expanding everywhere. I mean, we're seeing massive industrial parks springing up in Saudi Arabia, Hungary, Serbia, Morocco, Brazil, Indonesia.
Right.
My immediate thought when I see this list is capital flight. Like, how do they afford to build all these global nodes? Are they just shutting down production lines in Shenzhen and moving the equipment to Budapest?
Well, it's easy to assume that, right?
Huh?
That they're hollowing out their domestic industry.
Yeah.
But The Economist points out a really vital nuance here. China's overall share of global manufacturing hasn't dropped at all.
Wait, really? It hasn't dropped?
Not at all. This is not a relocation strategy.
Oh.
They are keeping their massive domestic manufacturing base fully operational, while at the same time sprouting these new production nodes globally.
So they're running dual systems.
Exactly.
The domestic engine keeps humming, and that generates the cash flow needed to fund this really aggressive global expansion.
That's right.
But, I mean, anyone who has ever tried to scale a business knows that opening a foreign branch is an absolute nightmare.
Oh, yeah.
You don't know the local suppliers. You don't have a reliable workforce. How are they bypassing that huge learning curve?
Well, by not relying on local suppliers at all.
What do you mean?
The real story here is that they're moving the entire neighborhood rather than just building a new house.
Okay.
Let's look at the electric vehicle market, specifically in Morocco.
Sure.
The Chinese battery giant Gotion is currently building a massive plant near the capital, Rabat.
Okay, yeah.
But Gotion is not going there alone.
Oh, I think I see where this is going. It's like a popular restaurant opening a new location in a different country, but instead of buying local ingredients, they just bring their own farmers, their own plate makers, and their own delivery drivers.
Yeah, they bring the whole system.
They bring the whole system. To take your restaurant analogy a step further, they even bring the people who build the kitchen appliances.
Wow.
So, following Gotion into Morocco are companies like BTR. And they manufacture the cathode and anode materials for the batteries.
And then you have Halion Group, which produces the copper foil. They are quite literally cloning their domestic industrial clusters and just dropping them into North Africa.
Which totally explains the staggering numbers we see in the hidden infrastructure.
Right.
Because our sources show that in the first half of 2026, Chinese exports of capital goods, meaning heavy machinery and factory equipment, that grew by 14%. And exports of intermediate goods, which are the raw parts used to build finished products, that grew by 27%.
Yeah, it's a huge jump.
It is. So these new foreign factories are actually importing Chinese machine tools, like those massive presses from Yangli Group, just to physically run their foreign assembly lines.
Exactly. And moving that volume of heavy machinery and raw materials, I mean, that requires a logistical network that most countries simply do not possess.
Right.
Which is why Chinese logistics firms have been quietly expanding their footprint, too.
Oh, okay.
They now operate, or at least have major investments in, at least 132 overseas ports.
130.
Yeah. And they're also financing rail networks, like the newly completed Budapest-Belgrade Railway in Europe.
Wow.
So they were exporting the machines, the raw materials, and the transportation infrastructure needed to connect it all together.
You know, it really makes you think. If you're listening to this on a smartphone or maybe driving a relatively new EV, there is a very high probability that this exact supply chain built the device you're using right now.
Absolutely.
Even if the box says, you know, made in Vietnam or made in Mexico, the machinery and the components inside likely flowed through this cloned ecosystem.
Yeah, they almost certainly did.
But setting up this parallel universe of manufacturing across dozens of countries, it sounds exhausting. Why go through the immense friction of moving an entire supply ecosystem?
Well, it all comes down to basic trade policy.
Okay.
If we look back in 2018, the average U.S. tariff on Chinese goods was only 0.9 percentage points higher than it was for goods from other countries.
Really? Just 0.9?
Yeah, less than 1%. So for an importer, there was essentially no difference. But by 2025, that gap exploded to 29 percentage points.
29%. I mean,
Yeah.
a 29% tax is enough to wipe out the profit margin of almost any consumer product.
Exactly, which triggered what we call a great reallocation.
Okay.
When shipping directly from China to the U.S. becomes prohibitively expensive, global businesses naturally look for a detour.
Sure.
And this massive price gap birthed the rise of what we call connector economies.
Connector economies, like who?
Countries like Vietnam, Malaysia, and Mexico. Suddenly, these nations are importing huge volumes of intermediate goods from China and then exporting huge volumes of finished goods to the U.S.
Okay, I have to be the skeptic here because this sounds like a giant loophole.
Right.
If a company takes a finished product, ships it to a warehouse in Mexico, slaps a Made in Mexico sticker over the original label, and then drives it across the border, they avoid the tariff.
Yeah.
Isn't that just blatant customs fraud?
Well, customs fraud absolutely happens, and we do need to separate that illegal activity from the broader legal shift.
Right.
What you just described is illegal transshipment.
Transshipment.
Yes. It's changing a label without adding any actual value to the product. And Goldman Sachs estimated there was about $40 billion in these superficial re-exports in 2023 alone.
Wow.
In fact, a U.S. trade fraud task force has recovered over $1 billion targeting this exact scheme.
I mean, 40 billion is a massive number, but in the context of global trade, it's kind of a drop in the bucket, right? The real volume has to be moving legally.
It is. The vast majority is operating under a long-standing legal standard known as substantial transformation.
Substantial transformation.
Right. For decades, global trade rules have dictated that if raw materials are shipped to a country like Mexico and local workers genuinely process them into a new product, that product is legally considered Mexican.
Okay, so to break that down, how do customs officials actually measure substantial transformation? Because it can't just be screwing two pieces of plastic together.
No. Traditionally, it's measured by the percentage of local labor involved or a significant change in the tariff classification. For example, if you import raw steel and aluminum and a factory in Mexico molds, welds, and assembles that metal into a car chassis,
Right.
the metal has been substantially transformed. So under the old rules, it is officially a Mexican car.
Okay, that makes sense for basic manufacturing. Like, if I buy flour and sugar from China, but I bake the cake in Mexico, it's a Mexican cake.
Exactly.
The problem is, modern products are not cakes.
No, they're not.
They are electric vehicles, solar panels, smartphones with thousands of micro components. It seems like these old rules of origin are completely unequipped to handle, like, a modern battery pack.
You hit the nail on the head. The complexity of modern technology is exactly what is breaking the old rule book. The U.S. government is realizing that measuring substantial transformation by local assembly labor, it just doesn't work when the most valuable part of an EV, which is the battery,
Right.
is entirely manufactured by a Chinese ecosystem operating inside Hungary or Morocco.
Which brings us to the White House report in our sources. It's called the Great Transshipment Scam, and it signals a massive pivot in U.S. strategy. They are no longer just looking at the shipping manifest to see where the boat came from.
Right.
They are actively hunting for the entire Chinese footprint.
Exactly. They are expanding their definition of origin. They want to know where the subcomponents were made.
Yeah, okay.
Who mined the raw materials, who owns the parent company, which bank financed the factory construction, even what logistics paths were used.
Let's pause and just think about the scale of what you just said.
Yeah.
The U.S. claims this shadow transshipment network spans 43 different countries.
Yeah.
And those 43 countries account for over 70% of all U.S. imports that don't come directly from China.
It's massive.
70%. If you walk into a big box store, 7 out of every 10 items on the shelves could be pulled into this regulatory dragnet.
Yeah.
If the U.S. starts questioning the origin of all those goods, they are basically interrogating the entire global trade system.
Which leads to a profound headache for regulators. I mean, think about this scenario. A car is assembled in Hungary. It uses a battery from a Chinese-owned company. The manufacturing equipment was imported from Germany. The software running the dashboard was designed in California. And the entire facility was funded by Chinese capital.
Oh, boy.
Under the new way the U.S. wants to look at trade, whose car is it?
It's a logistical nightmare. It's everyone's car and no one's car. How does a border agent even begin to process that?
Well, they can't manually. So the U.S. is considering some radical technological solutions. One proposal is an AI-driven detective border.
An AI detective analyzing cargo ships. How would that even work in practice?
The idea is to deploy machine learning algorithms that trace the entire lineage of a product in real time.
Real time? Wow.
Yeah. The system would scrape global corporate databases to identify the ultimate owners of supplier companies. It would cross-reference banking records to trace project funding.
Okay.
And map satellite tracking of shipping routes. Basically, it would hunt for any hidden Chinese footprint buried deep within a seemingly Mexican or Vietnamese supply chain.
I have to push back on the feasibility of that, though.
Sure.
Even if the AI could untangle that massive web of data, what happens when it finds the footprint?
Right.
If the U.S. actually starts taxing the entire supply chain based on the origin of individual components rather than the final assembly location, wouldn't the collateral damage be catastrophic?
Oh, absolutely.
Because American consumers and American tech companies rely heavily on these global ecosystems to keep prices down. If you tax every screw and lithium cell, regardless of where the car was assembled, you are going to trigger massive inflation.
And that inflation risk is the primary reason the U.S. has not fully unleashed these extreme measures yet.
Makes sense.
Regulators are trapped in this difficult balancing act. On one hand, they want to protect domestic industries from being undercut by state-subsidized foreign ecosystems.
Right.
But on the other hand, if they make it too expensive for the world to use these efficient supply chains, the cost of everyday goods for the American consumer will just skyrocket.
And we aren't just talking about cheap plastic toys or fast fashion anymore.
No.
If we look at where this ecosystem is moving, it is dominating high-tech, future-facing industries. I mean, I was struck by the diversity of the examples in The Economist's reporting.
Yeah, it's very broad.
I get how this works for basic goods, but surely they can't do this with highly complex tech.
Oh, they definitely are.
Right.
The breadth of this expansion is incredible, even in advanced sectors. Let's look at the solar energy sector, for example.
Okay.
Companies like Jinko Solar and Trina Solar initially moved their production to Southeast Asia to avoid U.S. tariffs.
Right, the connector economies.
Exactly. But as the U.S. started scrutinizing Southeast Asia, these companies realized they needed to diversify their geographic risk even further.
So they moved again.
Yeah. Now they're building massive new facilities in the Gulf region, in places like Saudi Arabia and the UAE.
So they are just hopscotching across continents just to stay ahead of the regulations?
Pretty much.
And the automotive sector seems to be doing the exact same thing right in Europe's backyard. In 2025 alone, Chinese greenfield investment in Europe, meaning building brand new facilities from the ground up rather than just buying existing European companies.
Right.
That hit a record 89 billion euros.
Yeah. That is a 50% increase in a single year.
50%.
And a fascinating case study there is Linglong Tire.
Okay.
They're building this highly automated, state-of-the-art factory in Serbia. And they aren't just selling to the local market there.
Who are they selling to?
They are supplying tires directly to classic Western automotive brands like Volkswagen and Ford.
Wow. It really shifts your perspective. I mean, you could be driving a quintessential German car built in Europe, but it's rolling on tires manufactured by a Chinese company operating a Serbian factory.
Exactly.
And this expansion even reaches into the core of the tech industry. I noted Zhangji Inolite in the sources.
Yeah.
They make high-speed optical components that are absolutely essential for cloud computing data centers.
Oh.
And they are now manufacturing these components in Thailand to supply global tech giants.
It paints a picture of total global integration across nearly every major industry.
It does, but, it also sounds a bit too perfect.
What do you mean?
It reads like a flawless master plan. Surely, packing up highly complex, multi-billion-dollar industries and just dropping them into Thailand, Serbia, or Brazil creates massive operational friction. They have to be hitting roadblocks.
Oh, friction is immense.
Yeah.
This is by no means a smooth transition.
Okay.
First, you have the unpredictability of the U.S. tariffs themselves.
Right.
Because the rules of origin keep shifting. A company might spend 2 years building a factory in a connector economy, only to have the project canceled halfway through because the U.S. suddenly announces a new tariff on that specific country.
Oh, man.
So the geopolitical ground is just constantly shifting underneath them.
That makes long-term capital investment incredibly risky. And what about the host countries? I can't imagine Brazil or Turkey are thrilled about foreign companies just building assembly warehouses without actually contributing to the local economy.
And they aren't. The host countries are becoming much more demanding now.
Really?
Yeah. Local governments recognize the value of access to their markets. They no longer just want a warehouse where workers screw 2 imported parts together.
Right.
They are demanding high-value local job creation and, more importantly, technology transfer.
Ah, technology transfer.
Yes. They want the foreign companies to train their workforce and share the engineering knowledge. They don't want to just be used as a stepping stone to bypass U.S. tariffs.
So the companies are being forced to invest much deeper into these local economies, which naturally increases their exposure to basic business risks.
Exactly.
If you're deeply invested in Turkey or Argentina, you have to deal with wildly fluctuating currencies, unfamiliar legal systems, and power grid issues.
And furthermore, they are facing significant friction from their own government back home.
Really? From Beijing?
Yes. In 2026, China implemented stringent new outbound investment rules.
Okay.
Beijing is actively restricting the transfer of certain advanced technologies and sensitive data abroad.
Oh, I see.
Because they want to protect their national security and maintain their domestic technological edge.
So these manufacturers are caught in a massive geopolitical vice.
They really are.
The U.S. is using AI to track their supply chains, the host countries are demanding their trade secrets, and their own government is restricting what technology they're even allowed to export. It is a very precarious balancing act.
It is. But despite all of that friction, the shift is undeniable. If we pull all these threads together, The Economist is identifying a fundamental evolution in the very nature of global manufacturing.
Okay.
Think about it in historical stages. First, we had the era of made in country X, right? Where one product was built entirely inside one border.
Right.
Then we moved to global value chains, where parts were sourced globally but assembled in one spot. Today, we have entered the era of the globalized industrial ecosystem.
A globalized industrial ecosystem. That implies the borders are almost irrelevant to the production process itself.
Because a country is no longer just exporting finished goods in boxes. They're exporting their actual method of manufacturing.
The method itself.
Right. The capital, the specialized machines, the integrated supplier networks, and the management systems.
Wow.
Because of this structural shift, looking at direct bilateral import numbers between two countries is no longer a useful way to understand global trade.
Okay.
Economists and regulators now have to focus on a new metric called value chain exposure.
Value chain exposure, meaning we have to measure how much a specific product relies on an underlying industrial ecosystem.
Yes.
Completely, regardless of the geographic location where the final assembly took place.
Exactly.
The physical location of the factory matters significantly less than who controls the technology, who provides the funding, and who orchestrates the supply network.
The map of where things are made has changed, sure, but the underlying system powering that map has simply expanded its roots deeper into the global economy.
We started this deep dive by looking at a paradox.
Right.
The U.S. managed to drop its direct Chinese imports down to 9%, while at the exact same time, Chinese companies invested over $200 billion in overseas manufacturing.
Yep.
It turns out both data points are true.
They are.
The U.S. successfully reduced the number of finished boxes arriving directly from Chinese ports. But maybe counting those boxes is the wrong metric entirely.
Well, if the ecosystem just moved the neighborhood, counting the boxes doesn't capture the reality of how our goods are actually made.
That is the core of it. So as we wrap up, I think we have to look past the tariffs, the customs labels, and the political rhetoric.
Agreed.
If you look at the phone in your hand or the car in your driveway, the real question we need to ask ourselves is this. Can the world actually build a functioning, modern manufacturing network that is completely independent of China's underlying industrial ecosystem?
That's the question.
Or, despite all the tariffs and de-risking strategies, are we just building the exact same machine, just in a different time zone? Think about that next time you check where your products are made.